Of course, we're going to react to the bombshell news today about John Elway stepping down as GM. I know that there's a little bit of a framing here on this, and he's still president of football operations. Mm-hmm. That job stays kind of intact, but this is a little bit of a lean into the future, which one way or the other, whether it was this year or even into next year, you kind of assumed eventually this was going to happen, whether record or not, because he was even asked about that. Hey, if you were 13-3, would you be doing this? There are kind of a few things at play, but before we get too deep into that, first of all, got to ask you, Ben, when you heard that news, what was your reaction? What does this mean for the Broncos, at least right now?
Well, this was the plan for next year, so it wasn't surprising in that regard. I just wondered what sped up the timetable, and I think it allows for certain egresses in a more tactful way, probably down the line. Champ Kelly's probably the leader in the clubhouse on this one. He's director of player personnel. Excuse me, that's a mouthful. With the Chicago Bears right now. Previously been with the Broncos in a similar capacity. He has ties to both, obviously, John Elway here because he left with John Fox and Vic Fangio over there in Chicago. So he's worked with both before. Comfortable relationships there. I was told by a former Broncos player that he was a shoo-in for the job. So, whatever. And that's a person that played during that era. Adam Peters is one name to kind of keep an eye on. I don't think that he's going to be the guy here. I think from what I've heard that he's going to be heavily in play for the Carolina GM job. Okay. He and Matt Rule, the head coach there, previously worked together at UCLA. And so their relationship is pretty tight. I think that's the direction he's going to go. It's one of those informed guesses, if you will. And then John Spytek, who has the coolest last name of all time.
No question. He's out in Tampa Bay.
Right, out in Tampa. Has got some connections to this thing. I would say he's probably the dark horse of all this. But I think it's going to be Champ Kelly. I think he's going to be. There'll be some other names added to the list, and they'll do some interviews. But I think it's going to be Champ Kelly.
Okay. No, I'm 100% with you. I mean, I like Adam Peters. I was certainly bummed when the 49ers poached him, and I knew he meant a lot to this organization. So when that kind of came down a few years back, I was kind of like, man, that's a really good hire, and look what they were able to do out there. They obviously really stocked that roster. It was a depleted team that was really headed nowhere, and with Adam Peters' help, and again, an organizational direction that they had between Lynch and Shanahan, they were able to put together some impressive rosters there and obviously get themselves into the Super Bowl last year. So one of the things that I think has come up a lot, and this has been wildly debated on social media, and that is what does this mean for Drew Lock? And even here on the text line getting a question about, new GM might want to trade up, might want to get his own guy here. Ben, but without knowing ultimately who the GM is, based on the way the Broncos finished up the season, based on what you relatively know about the team's view on Drew Lock, what does this decision by John Elway mean for him right now?
One of the things a former general manager told me, and it really kind of resonated with me, is as a general manager, you've got 10 years is a long time for somebody to be general manager. It is. It's a short-lived tenure, and you're high profile, and you get all the blame and none of the credit, right? And he said, in order to set yourself up, in order to have the longest tenure and career possible, generally you just want to come into that first year and kind of let things be, because you'll get a real chance to evaluate honestly what your strengths and weaknesses are up close and personal. And oh, by the way, you're not going to get blamed for that first season. That's the leftovers of the previous regime. So if it works, you look like the genius because you added the few pieces they needed to be successful. And if it craters, then you get to blow everything up and build it the way you wanted to begin with. Right. And you bought yourself a couple of years to do that.
And see, that for me is kind of the interesting demarcation here, because we had been saying for a little while that, through 2021, when contracts were up, whether it's continuing with this direction or making a few major tweaks, as in with your coaching staff, so on and so forth, and especially their quarterback, for me, as you said sort of at the top of the show, the timeline has always kind of been through 2021. So this for me is more about the tipping of that. Like this is we're tipping towards the future a little bit and looking to bring in a GM that is going to be kind of worked into the flow of what they're trying to do. Now, you're not going to make the first move, okay, and now I am drafting a first-round quarterback at the top of this draft because I don't believe in what you have been building here. That doesn't mean that they can't do that. It doesn't mean that John Elway won't allow that to happen. It just seems to me like if that is the focus immediately, I still look at the rest of this roster and see there's a lot of other bigger decisions to be made.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it. I think a new general manager coming in, his priority isn't going to necessarily be the draft. I know that's where fan priority is. His priority is going to be, okay, I've got some people leaving. I've got some RFAs. I've got some people I need to make some decisions on.
Like right now.
Right now. Phil Lindsay, Tim Patrick, Alexander Johnson. Those are restricted free agents. I got to make decisions on how to tender them and what to do with them.
Key
first.
Contributors. Yes.
Right. Then I've got to look at the guys that are, can leave. Shelby Harris, Justin Simmons, who just played on the tag. What are my options with that? Can I convince him? Can I tag him again and convince him let's work together on a long-term deal that didn't get done the last time? It's going to be a tough sell.